John Croy, Cranston, Jack Braun, Captain Flint, Brain Trust, Earl Sanderson, Silver Helix, Chop Chop, Young Troll, Stopwatch, Will-O-Wisp, Turtle, and Xavier Desmond.
Hello, welcome to Card Table. So up next is Volume 12. This is the last book published by Bantam Publishers, the original publisher of Wildcards that published all 1 through 12. And I know George R. R. Martin has talked a little bit about how, because they moved to a publisher called Baen and did 3 books with them. And he mentioned something about how, because the books came out really close together, like Bantam produced Volume 12 and then Baen produced Volume 13, maybe even the same month or like 1 month later they published it. There was something like where it was so close, and I guess Bantam maybe was a little annoyed by that, or maybe it wouldn't have mattered, but they were disinclined to really promote Volume 12 because they knew that if they did, they were also promoting Volume 13, which was out from another publisher. So Martin talked about this being like kind of one of the lost books in a way because it didn't benefit from any kind of huge publicity push. He made it sound on his blog as if Volume 12 is one of the less, maybe had fewer sales or one of the less well read. I don't know. I've read them all, so what can I say about it? But it's really good. Volume 12 is the second solo book. I mentioned that Melinda Snodgrass wrote Double Solitaire last time, so this one's Vic Milan. And anyone who's been watching all these videos, God help you if you have. Vic Milan, I've trumpeted many times as my favorite Wildcards author, and Captain Trips is my favorite Wildcards character. And so now with Volume 12, Vic Milan writes a solo novel, so that's my favorite author, and the lead character is Captain Trips, my favorite character. So this is the one for me. Now, of course, I decided who my favorite character was, after the fact, like after reading all of them. So, this book probably is partly, what made him my favorite character. So which came first? Did I love Milan and Captain Trips, which made me love this book? Or did I just love this book so much that it persuaded me that those were my favorite writer and character, respectively? It's called Turn of the Cards. So this is Volume 12. So it's, you could argue it's a little bit of an epilogue to the Rocks triad, or you could even argue it's kind of a sequel to Double Solitaire because Captain Trips was in Double Solitaire and had quite a lot of dramatic stuff happen to that character. Melinda Snodgrass didn't leave Captain Trips unscathed at the end of that book, and so there's some stuff there's some post traumatic type stuff that Captain Trips has to deal with at the start of Turn of the Cards, and part of the arc of this book is that. It also introduces this near the end, but it's more near the, say, 2/3 in. Turn of the Cards introduces this idea that there's a anti-Wildcards conspiracy. Some powerful people are working behind the scenes to do what they can to disenfranchise and disable and actively harm in some cases both aces and jokers. And that conspiracy is later revealed to be the Card Sharks conspiracy, which is the whole gist of volumes 13, 14, and 15. That's kind of considered to be the Card Sharks triad or the Card Sharks trilogy. I personally, in my personal conception of how to break these books up, I really consider Turn of the Cards to be a prequel to that, or the first Card Sharks book in a 4-book cycle. If you were to put them all next to each other on the shelf, because 3 of them have the Baen Publishing trade dress, and Turn of the Cards has the old Bantam dress. They don't look like they're of a piece on the shelf, but I consider them to be of a piece. However you want to look at it, as a sequel to Double Solitaire, or the epilogue to the Rocks Jumper stuff, or as a prequel to the Card Shark stuff, or just as its own thing. I guess that's one of the things I like about the book, is that it kind of works on all those levels. Even as a standalone book, I guess I don't know for sure that it would work, but it sure feels like there's enough going on its own to make it just a cool book to read if you were someone who maybe had only read the first book and maybe wanted to try a second one, but were kind of intimidated by going through all 30, and just wanted to cherry pick. 12 would be one that it would be one of the cherries for me personally that I would suggest picking for a new reader. It's got a lot going on. It's almost like its own little trilogy of novellas in itself. It's kind of structured that way. I can't remember what the 3 sections are called. They're all kind of named after like an old 60s or like classic rock song lyric. Although I don't know that I would actually be able to name the 3 sections. Maybe I can flash them up on the screen. But Tor recently put out their edition of this one with a great Michael Comack painted cover. And with Tor, I pick and choose when, I own all the old original editions of these books. So when Tor does the re-releases, I sort of pick and choose. If there's new material, of course I pick it up. But if it's a book I've already read and there's no new material, I'm a little more, tentative. I'm not sure that I need to spend that money. But with Turn of the Cards, just because I love it so much, I was like, and I love the new cover so much, I was like, screw it. I know I already own a copy, but I want the Tor edition too. So I went ahead and bought that one. And not that I've ever actually read that version of it, but I have it, and that's, I don't know, I need to have it. It's all about Captain Trips, who I've talked about in previous videos, but he's the character who whenever he has these different powders that he takes, and when he downs one of the powders, he's able to transform into a totally different character with his own powers or whatever for 60 minutes at a time. And so he's got like Jumpin' Jack. They're all named after pop songs, right? So, or rock songs. So there's Jumpin' Jack Flash and Aquarius and Moon Child. Aquarius, Jumpin' Jack Flash, Moonchild, and Cosmic Traveler. He's sort of like a whole cast of characters in and of himself, which in some ways makes it a cheat to name him as my favorite character, because then I get to actually like have like 5 or 6 favorite characters all kind of bound in there. That's my way of kind of cheating the favorite character challenge with wildcards. But there's always been a little bit of mystery about like the mechanism of how that works, like that Vic Milan has set up in previous books, Captain Trips having been significant in the first 2 books, and then in 8, 9, and 10 as well. Always as a lead in his little section of the book, but there's just so much to explore there, and there's always this mystery of, are these, is he a dissociative identity disorder, with these characters being different alters who thanks to the wildcard virus are able to manifest as different bodies, or are they actually people in and of themselves who are like have somehow been absorbed into this Captain Trips persona. Turn of the Cards furthers the exploration of that. Doesn't really resolve it, but it sort of furthers the exploration of that mystery. And ultimately, I think it was just so brilliant to make Captain Trips the star of a solo novel, and do a whole book all about him, because he is a cast of characters in and of himself, and to make him just one character in an ensemble when he himself is this walking ensemble, it always feels like, oh man, you always just wish there was more of him, or I always do whenever you read about him in these other stories. And so to let him have the spotlight for the whole book was just so brilliant. I'm so glad they let Milan have this opportunity. Whoever's decision it was, George R. R. Martin, Melinda Snodgrass, a lot of, like I say, a lot of this era of books, there's not a lot of, that I can find, a lot of background on how they came together. George R. R. Martin, for the first 5 books, he actually wrote essays when iBooks put out new editions, going into some of the behind the scenes stuff, which I really live for. And so you really get to see a little bit about how the sausage is made when it comes to those first 5 books. But after that, it's there's a lot less behind the scenes material out there, and so I would love to know more about how Turn of the Cards came about. But however it did, I just think it's such a brilliant stroke of genius to give Vic Milan his own chance at Captain Trips, his own spotlight, novel length spotlight. It's just and I think Milan just takes full advantage of the opportunity. I think Captain Trips is just such a compelling lead character, it's just really cool. It's and like I say, it's like a little trilogy of novellas, all about each one, all about him. So the first one, he's sort of on the run because of some of the events of the previous books. He's a fugitive. He's sort of, fugitive from justice. And the first book has this very kind of fugitive-like feel. Captain Trips keeps turning up in different milieus, or different parts of the world, different cities. Hoping that the feds don't catch up to him this time, and eventually they do, and there's a little altercation, and he has to escape again. So it's got that. It's very much like the fugitive kind of thing, and then he escapes to Vietnam, which in the Wildcards world, as of this book, Vietnam is this country that's become a sort of haven for Wildcards, a sort of promised, kind of like what the Rocks was, this kind of promised Joker homeland. Where Jokers can be safe, and so Captain Trips thinks he can kind of head there and fight on the side of this faction that wants to make Vietnam into this haven for wildcards, and not be extradited by the feds, just sort of become a citizen of Vietnam, of New Vietnam, or Free Vietnam, as it's called. And that middle third of the book becomes that's sort of like, if the first novella, the first third is the fugitive, then the second sequence, or the second piece is where you have your platoon, Full Metal Jacket kind of sequence. It's Vietnam. It's at least in terms of the milieu and the sort of atmosphere. I know Vic Milan says in like an afterword to the book that he was like, this book is set in 1991, not in 1969. So it's not really a Vietnam story. It's not really meant to be a commentary on was the U.S. right to get involved, or any of the politics or those implications. It's just sort of taking those Vietnam War movie tropes, like the jungle, the sort of whatever you would call that. That's, I want to say claustrophobic, but it's not quite. They are outdoors, but that feel of a Vietnam movie, of just the sort of the weight of the jungle, and that heavy, both the weight of the environment and the weight of the situation of being at war, capturing up that feel, even though it's not about the politics of the Vietnam War in any way, or it's not meant to evoke or comment on that, at least not to the extent of a movie like Platoon or Full Metal Jacket. It's really more about, but it does capture up the feel of those kind of movies, the aesthetic of them, in prose form. And then that section of the book, and then the rest of the book is in Vietnam, although it does take a turn for the final third, what I think of as kind of the final novella of the book, which is where, without giving away every twist, Mark Meadows kind of hooks up with this character named Bellew, the mechanic, an ace whose ace name is the mechanic, and they kind of form a partnership, and the mechanic sort of gets Mark to sort of switch sides in this war that he's been fighting on, because he alerts him to the existence of this anti-wildcards conspiracy, which is not yet called the Card Sharks, but we learn of its existence, and that sort of shifts the whole tone and momentum of the book at that point, and takes it to its very rousing conclusion. And I can't remember if I've mentioned this before about Milan. I've noticed that Milan, because I love his work so much, he's one of the Wildcards writers that I've followed to non-Wildcards properties, just read some of their other work, and I've noticed this in his other books too, and his Wildcards work, that he will sometimes go for like a really kind of long, slow simmer for certain sequences. It's he can. I know he used to, on his blog, his tagline was intelligent action adventure, i.e., there's your genre, but what sets it apart is that it's maybe smarter than the average bear or whatever. Not just like kind of dumbed down action movie tropes. Although you still get all those action movie tropes, but with a with a smarter underlying point of view to it. If you think of Milan as an action adventure writer, there's a surprisingly large amount of sort of literary real estate or page count to the kind of slow simmer where there's not really a lot of action or adventure, or at least it's all kept at a certain level, and then he just really explodes it for like the climax of the book. I think you can feel that a little bit in the latter 2/3 of Turn of the Cards. I remember on the Facebook Wildcards group, somebody mentioning that they thought the middle third of the book dragged, and I confess when I was young that I found that middle third to be a drag too. And I guess even when I read it now, yeah, there's a section where it gets a little meandery, and I think it's because he's trying to create that sense of the drudgery part of war, and it's I can't remember who described it this way, but somebody has described being at war as like these like kind of long periods of drudgery and boredom, punctuated by these kind of horrible, terrifying moments of life or death combat. And I think he was really trying to like establish that and really make you feel that, but it does lead to some kind of meandery parts in the middle of the book. And then it kind of takes an uptick in the final third, and then in the final few chapters, it just really, like, so much stuff just kind of happens at once, and it's like firework grand finale, and really feels like a great payoff to the whole book. It pays off in the end, I think, and I love the first section of the book too, the whole fugitive part. And generally speaking, I just like Milan's writing. So for me, even the meandery stuff now, as an adult reader, being such a fan of his, I find it very tolerable. Although I guess I could understand why a reader might start to lose it. But I guess I would say if you are inclined to read this one, keep the faith. Keep the faith during the meandery part in the middle, because it definitely, at a certain point, it kind of clicks over and becomes very, very intense and exciting. And the final third of the book is just kind of payoff after payoff. Croyd Crenson, the sleeper, gets to be in this one. I think he's a character who I think I lamented last time about how Jay Aykroyd, a fan favorite character, is sort of only really pops, so to speak, when George R. R. Martin writes him. I think the sleeper, Roger Zelazny's creation, has a sort of magical quality to him that sort of, I think part of that is that every single Wildcards writer seems to really like the sleeper and is probably like a great fan of Zelazny because he's such a legend. But it just seems like every writer, whenever they write the sleeper, they do a good job. It's almost like the sleeper just has like this magical quality to him that almost even makes the writing better. Like there are some times where it's like, I mean, like certain writers where I never like them more than when they have the sleeper show up. But certainly, Vic Milan is he's already my favorite. So his take on the sleeper is a favorite as well. Although, like I say, I think every Wildcards writer does a great sleeper, a great Croyd Crenson. But it's great to see him here, and he is in that middle section that, if you're looking for maybe antidotes to the meandery quality that I mentioned before, the fact that the sleeper is in that middle section a lot really elevates it, and really you're sort of kind of there for the sleeper in that middle section. So thank goodness that Milan chose to put him in there. So yeah, so overall, Turn of the Cards. I guess it's worth mentioning the mechanic has been called. I've seen at least one person online, and I've sort of taken to thinking of it this way myself, as a Mary Sue, which I know some people don't like that term, and I think I've seen it said that the term Mary Sue is meant to only apply to female characters, although I don't think that's true anymore. I think it's just anytime you have a character kind of show up in an established world, and suddenly he or she is the most badass character in that world. I remember Vic Milan himself, this is a total digression, but on his Facebook, Vic Milan made a joke or made a comment about how the little drummer boy is a Mary Sue, just kind of inserted into the story of the birth of Jesus and the wise men and the established canon, Mary and Joseph, baby Jesus, the three wise men. Those are the characters, those are the canon. And then all of a sudden, Oh, also there was a little drummer boy. All of a sudden, he's an important character in that story. What a Mary Sue. I'm sure he had his tongue in his cheek a little bit when he said that, but it's a funny way to think of the Mary Sue idea. And suddenly he's the best drummer, and Jesus loves his drumming that much. Ironically, I think Vic Milan has the most blatant Mary Sue of any Wildcards writer in the form of the mechanic. Just and it's really, I mean, it's clear right from this first appearance, right in volume 12. He just shows up, and he's just this sort of guy who's like, he's good at everything. He's read every book to the point where he can just kind of always have an apropos quote at hand from any literary, always a literary quotation that perfectly suits the occasion. And is also, he's established as a very skilled lover, but also like a very, brilliant covert CIA operative, but also, proficient with every single firearm ever and every form of hand-to-hand combat, and incredibly smart about, politics and history, and it also is on the masthead of both Soldier of Fortune and Rolling Stone, and has slept with Madonna. He makes a point of saying that at some point. This is 1990 when Madonna would have been, quite the notch, I guess. So it's a bit much. It's very shameless, and I think maybe the shamelessness is why I don't mind it and even rather adore it. But it's there. It's noticeable. but I like it, and I think it's fun, and I actually really enjoy his interactions with Captain Trips. Captain Trips is this sort of very left-leaning hippie, the last hippie they call him, and which is not at all Vic Milan's point of view, whereas the mechanic is a libertarian like Milan himself, and so there's a lot of like little fun like political debates between mechanic and Captain Trips that are just kind of fun to read, knowing Milan's own politics. So anyway, it's in there. It's something to take note of. But yeah, overall, really great book. One of my favorite in the series, Turn of the Cards by Vic Milan. And that's it for now, and I'll talk about the next one next time.
So my honey and me go to a counselor to try and give our love back some sparks. He said, we'll get your love growing, but before we get going, may I highly recommend Cod Shocks? I like to go out dancing. My baby loves a bunch of authors. Lately we've had some friction, cause my baby's hooked on shared world fiction.